Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BAFTA Guru Live. I'm Nigel Latif. I'm a filmmaker and theatre director, and I'm delighted that you can join us for this year's Film Masterclass with thanks to our session supporter EE, who are supporting all film-related sessions of Guru Live Digital this year. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Remi Weeks, the writer and director of the brilliant and terrifying His House. Before we begin, please note that this event has closed captions. Closed captions can be turned on via the CC button at the bottom of your screen. I've always wanted to do that. Remi and I will be chatting for like an hour, after which we'll save about 15 minutes for audience questions. So if you have a question for Remi, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can. It's there. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get started. Remi Weeks is a writer and director whose work in commercials and his brilliant short film Tickle Monster laid the groundwork for his debut feature, His House, which is currently making waves as one of the most exciting horror films of the year. The most exciting. I believe in, let's go there. His House was produced by Star Child Pictures, BBC Films, New Regency, and Vertigo Entertainment, and it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year, which is where I saw it. Where it was probably more importantly acquired by Netflix.
You was at Sundance?
I saw it at Sundance, yeah. I'm really good friends with Wumi and Choco. So
How did we not
in like the first audience?
How did we not connect? That's so weird.
I think because I mainly was like covered in knitwear and not interested in talking to anyone at that stage. I had full festival fatigue, but actually,
the coronavirus. Oh,
yeah. Let's not joke about that. But anyway, congrats and welcome.
Thank you.
Really cool. So I will get to let's start at the very beginning. And I would like to ask you, from one horror filmmaker to another horror filmmaker, about where your love of film came from. Like, what was the first film you remember seeing in the cinema? And for extra points, because the cinema is on its ass right now, can you remember which cinema you saw it in?
Oh my God, I can't remember which cinema. It would probably be, if I'm guessing, it would either be Holloway, Odeon, or Finchley, the Hollywood Bowl, the multiplex, probably. But then, I mean, I'm just guessing here. The first film I saw in the cinema, I think, was The Lion King, which I thought was called the Lion King, because some kid at school said, I've gone to see The Lion King and it's really good. And I went to the cinema and I was very shocked to find out it was talking lions.
Yeah, and yet apparently
it's an amazing film.
And yet, I grew up in East Africa in Sudan, and I'm like, wow, that is the closest that Disney are going to get to making films about actual Africans. Let's have talking animals. Yeah. That's fine.
And Elton John.
So what were your like really like early film loves? Like, were there any like particular films or particular genres? Like, I think anyone's lying when they're like, I was really like drawn to the work of this particular director, but you're like, yeah, what were the things that made you go, film is awesome?
You know what? Like, I've said this before recently, because I think it's only something I've only recently looked back on. But I grew up, and one of the films I remember falling in love with was The Wiz with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's Scarecrow, Diana Ross says I'm Dorothy, and they go through Harlem, which is meant to be Oz. And I fell in love with the film. I still know all the songs, sing along to the songs.
I am currently singing Ease On Down the Road.
Ease On Down the Road, Quincy Jones, playing by Michael Jackson. And I was just like, that film was everything for me. And then as I got a bit older, when I was like maybe 10 or something, I remember watching on TV on a Sunday afternoon on BBC or something, this old movie with Judy Garland in it. And I was watching it thinking, this is exactly like The Wiz. Mm-hmm. And I found out that was The Wizard of Oz, and The Wizard of Oz came first. And that just made me think of how my cultural center, or the things that I grew up loving, was kind of skewed towards maybe, I guess, more brown and black people, and that there was this other culture, which was The Wizard of Oz, which I began to really understand maybe later in life.
So next up, we're going to be watching a Remi Weeks musical, right?
Oh my God, I would love to do a musical.
I think you would rock a musical. I think
I
I like fully see that in your like imminent future. I mean, I don't know you, but like,
do you see it for me?
yeah, I wish that for you. I wish you that, like, you know, that
Thank
La La
you.
Land money.
I mean, I would love to. I mean, I would love to do The Wiz. The Wiz is awesome. I mean, why not?
Yeah, well, there's something weirdly that like connects musical audiences and horror audiences, not to get too like literal about it, but there's something remarkably like generous about both film forms, right? It's like they're trying to draw everybody in and give them like a common experience of like whether you enjoy being scared or you enjoy like tapping your toes. I think there's just something very audience facing about both genres. I mean, they're trying to reach out in whatever way.
Oh, totally. Like, I think all kinds of genres, they are built to take you away, to take you on a journey, to transport you. And I think that's probably what, like anyone, like even I bet you even Michael Haneke, like he began loving films by going to the cinema and watching the same films that everyone fell in love with, and takes you far and away, and then you don't want to leave. I mean, my best experiences is when you know the film's nearly finishing and you don't want it to finish. I mean, if you can make a film like that, then you're winning.
Or like that film where you're like, I can't believe it's finished. Like I could just
Can't
like
believe.
sit in this story for
Yeah.
years and I would be very happy, which does not mean endless sequels. I would hasten to add. That's a very different thing.
No.
So when did your like love of film and that kind of like, you know, maybe like all young people love films, when did that suddenly like flip into, no, I wanna do this. I'm gonna make films.
I feel like I just decided one day when I was 13, and then it became like a constant in my life, and it got to a point where it was too late to back down. I think I just was watching, I think I was probably watching Scream or something, and I was like, oh yeah, this is probably what I want to do. And I think I read that directors directed films. I was like, that's it, on direct films.
I always think that like directors come to making films like with either like the pen or the camera in their hand. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like that's the two kind of paths. It's like, oh, I want to tell stories, or I want to make pictures, and then you kind of sit them together. Which were you? Were you a camera guy or a pen guy?
I guess I did both. When I was much younger, I used to write. I used to love reading like books like Goosebumps and Point Horror. I used to read them, and then I would rewrite it like my own version and send it to my grandparents, and they've kept them, which is sweet. So I was always doing that, but then we had a family camcorder when I was, I guess, 12 and 13, and then when I went into secondary school, me and my friends, we always used to make little short zombie movies.
Oh
Guess I'm still doing that.
But tell me about that, because like I have a question later that's gonna be all about this, but like the lo-fi zombie film is my absolute, like, One Cut of the Dead, I genuinely think is like a cinematic masterpiece. Do you know what I mean? Because the lo-fi zombie film is so amazing. Like it's such a like loving, weird bit of horror where you're like, I just want to do like really crap zombie stories with like really rubbish entrails.
Yeah, and there's such a bizarre cultural idea, the zombie, which has such a strange history. I mean, obviously this is all stuff I'm thinking about now, not when I was 13 years old. 13 years old is all about like making fake blood, getting a pillows and putting clothes on them and pushing them out a window and filming a body drop from the sky. And that was what I was focusing on. That was art when I was 13 years old.
So why horror? What does horror allow you to do? You know, and I don't think we're necessarily that different from our 13-year-old selves in that thing. Like, what was it about horror? Did you just want to like scare people? Did you want to impress people? Do you know what I mean? Did you want to gross people out? Like, what made you like, that's my...
I mean, when it's hard to say when I was like that age, because I feel like that was me just having fun is pure id. Like me and a bunch of other teenage boys, like trying stuff out from what we've seen or thought was cool on TV. I think actually, to be like when I started to, I guess, mature, grow up, I that kind of stuff didn't interest me that in the same way. I kind of moved into I guess just experimenting, trying to work out what I'm trying to do, what I'm saying, which I still feel like I'm trying to work out. But I think I think like anyone, the mystery of life has always been something that, fills my mind. The world's just one big phenomenon and we're all living it. And I think horror has the ability to crack open that and to um, make the real world somewhat more surreal and strange, and opens it up to ideas and myths and fantasies and dreams, and pulls out your fears and your anxieties and makes it visual and makes it communal when you go to a cinema and you watch it with everyone else, or watch on Netflix with your family. it's it, it really, I think that's what great stories do. It reminds us that the world isn't cut and dry, that it's mysterious and strange and I guess scary.
I think it's Stephen King who said he's like horror is basically about like driving us apart from the world. It's about separating us from the rest of the world and making us realize that we are alone. And that manifests, I guess, in like nobody is coming to save us. But I think that for like Black and brown filmmakers, that's always held like real affinity, right? That you're like, yeah, I know what it is to be separate. I know what it is to be isolated in a crowd or amongst people who don't look like me, whatever. Do you think that, you were saying how like the part of you that loves the whiz, that sees Black and brown people in places that maybe you don't expect them, do you think that is also the part of you that goes, I want to express myself through terror and horror and fear? Because like, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to say, like, are those two things like actually the same?
No, I think I'm not like that's a hard question, and I think I don't know if I know yet. I do know that growing up and when I was a teenager, and I think that's when I was a teenager, I started to become more critical when it comes to film, and having a real opinion on what's a great film and what's not a good film, and really searching out good films and going back into the history of film and really pulling out VHSs back in the day and watching them. And I think like one of my favorite filmmakers in the world is Alfred Hitchcock. I think he's my god. I think he's so good, and his films just completely, like, I watch one of his films, more than one of his films yearly, just as a pure pleasure. And I think I think it's weird when you are a minority, because when you're a minority and you love an art form, you have to contend with the fact that your heroes are probably going to be white men. And so you will watch and you will love the films, but you'll never, I'll never watch a Hitchcock film to be like, yeah, that's like my uncle. Or like that, yeah, like that's so true. Like I never that's never a feeling I've had. And so I've always felt like if I was to make films, it would be marrying the things I love about cinema, but putting it into a gaze that feels a little bit more familiar to me, that questions things or asks questions of the world that I ask. And I think, it's, I guess,
But I think there's something really interesting because, like, I agree with you, being somebody who makes horror films, you're like, well, all my references are going to be white dudes, maybe some white women, because that's the reality. But, I remember, like, the first time I saw Ganja and Hess, I was like, oh, shit, like, even the way that blackness, and there is some, like, amazing representations of blackness in white-made horror films, if you think about Dead, but actually there is something about seeing Black horror represented through a Black lens, by a Black filmmaker that makes you like, and it is exceptional. I think it's an exceptional film, and it's very strange. But
Yeah.
you're right. You're really grasping for like tiny examples of that type of work.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm telling you, you've become like the second film in a canon of Black horror. Congratulations.
I mean,
I have a question for you, which is about white,
yeah.
the big white dudes, like the amazing white horror makers. So we're going to play a quick game of Kiss, Marry, Kill. You've got to choose between Wes Craven, David Cronenberg, and George Romero. You've got to kiss one of them, you've got to marry one of them, and you've got to kill the third.
I don't want to kill any of them. Would George Romero come back as the undead?
No zombie getting out jokes. Yeah, no.
I mean, Scream. Like, I love Scream so much. Hang on, wait. Who's it? George Romero and who's the other one?
Cronenberg.
You know what? I'll kill Cronenberg probably. Sorry.
Oh my god. No, I mean, I'm basically just asking you. It's a roundabout way of me asking you, like, body horror, the zombie, a slasher. Like, what are your biggest?
I'd kiss Wes because I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream, like they're like canon, and who's the other? Who was the other one you saying? Romero. Yeah, I mean, he invented. What did he invent? Well, I guess not, but he made the zombie, and that's props. So.
Yeah, well, and also like I rewatched Night of the Living Dead recently, and I was like, it actually doesn't get better than this. And I was like, it's so like good. It's just shonky enough where you're like, oh, the whole people are the worst thing doesn't feel annoying. You're like, yes, people are the worst thing. They are much.
People are the worst.
People are the worst, always. Particularly white people in that film. You're like, oh, the poor black man is going to save them all and then die. But so, other than those, like, what are your biggest kind of horror influences?
One of my biggest horror influences. Oh, Scream. I mean, I love that film. Calls coming from inside the house.
Or just the first one?
I love all three, actually. Yeah, for Dewey. Was I love Stephen King. Mm-hmm. Not all his adaptations, but I enjoy his books. I remember loving It when I was younger, being so terrified of It. The book, not the adaptations. I don't know, it's such a hard question. People ask me this quite a bit, and it's really hard for me to answer because I feel like it all kind of flows into each other. Like, there definitely isn't like a couple of horror films that like it's my core. Like, I just really enjoy watching movies. I guess Psycho would be one of them as well.
Were you all influenced by East Asian horror, kind of like J horror and K horror and like all of those films? Like, I feel like there was a moment in the late 90s where I discovered those. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, Audition.
Yeah, right.
And what's it with the twins? What's it called?
Is it Tale of Two Sisters?
Tale of Two Sisters. Yeah, I love the film. Because I love how melodramatic it is. I love when horror's not just like stabbing people. Like, I mean, that's a place for that. But like, I like it. That's what I like about the Japanese ones, is that they can be quite melodramatic.
I think also like there's a very interesting like cultural imperatives within J horror and K horror, like notions of like propriety and honor, and like I would revenge has a real meaning, whereas here you're a bit like, oh, it's a bit extra. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you're like, those have real values in East Asian horror cinema. So you're like, yeah, she can fully kill his child and feed it to him as a dumpling because he insulted her once. You're like,
totally. And I think it's I think there was a moment J horror came at a time when American horror got very comfortable after Scream in being just about like killing teenagers. And it was a moment to remind us that ghosts are scary, and
Yeah.
grudges, and your past.
Yeah. And also I think that it's always interesting when you talking about Scream, where I'm like, I feel like a lot of that American slasher horror, including Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and Friday the 13th, like all of those franchises start in a really strong, incredibly strong place, but very often it feels like the franchising of them forgets what the thing people like love about the original film is. Do you know what I mean?
Freddy versus Jason.
But do you know what I mean? But also, I think like when I really watched the most recent Halloween reboot, which actually is very good, I was like, there's something about this film that it respects the stupidity of the original film. Do you know what I mean? Where you're just like, sometimes people are just in like scary cabins in the woods on their own, and like we don't need to kind of literalize that. So I sort of have a place for both, I think, right? Where you're like, and I guess this is going to lead me eventually to his house and that whole creating a horror film with real world narratives during real situations and not anyway, but we can get there. I actually have a question before that, which is about are you comfortable calling yourself a genre director?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, sure.
But do you feel like that's something people are putting on you already with just like one feature? They're like, well, that's Remi, he does horror films.
No, nobody knows what to put on me. Like nobody, like people, like depending on who you ask, has a different opinion. Which I mean, I'm fine with that. I don't mind. I don't like. You can't control what people say.
But would you like to? Ideally, would you be like, I wish people wouldn't do that?
Oh. No, I don't, like it doesn't like irritate me, or it doesn't. I don't cringe when I hear it. So I mean,
do you think there are any dangers? Just like thinking about like directors starting out and being like, I really want to make like a and it could be any genre. That's the thing. Like I'm not saying that it's like horror exclusive.
Yeah.
But do you think the labeling of directors as genre directors is helpful?
It's a weird label because I don't know, like genre. Like as you said, there's so many different genres, but like everything's a genre. Like it doesn't like really make much sense. I guess does it mean like popular cinema as opposed to like
which has also become a kind of dirty word. It's like you can make very good films that people want to watch.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird like elevated horror. It's one of these weird words that I think they're more used for people who are selling films. And
I could talk about how much the phrase
films.
Elevated horror is annoying for the rest of my life. It makes me want to pull out my teeth and swallow them one by one. Because what does that? I mean, does it mean anything to you? When you talk about his house, do you say it's? I mean, by the common definition, it is an elevated horror film. But what does that like? Does that mean anything to you?
I mean, I mean, like genre. The only times people really talk about this with me is when they're talking about selling films or pitching films to movie studios or to producers or to exhibitionists. Like, so for me, it just sounds like marketing. And like, that's not how I think about films.
So this leads me slightly further back, but this is actually a seamless segue, so stick with me. To your work in commercials, just because, talking about selling things. And I feel like when people hear the phrase commercials director, they're like, what, he just like points a camera at a car? And like that's, and of course, like all of your work with Tell No One was the opposite of that. It was like, how do you bring like almost like a kind of art film aesthetic into commercial work? Do you feel, I mean, A, I'd like to hear just about how you got started in commercials, but B, also, do you feel like that was always for you the first step in a narrative career? Were you using it for a testing ground for your narrative work, or was it a kind of separate part of your practice?
So I'm just going to turn my my antiviral software off because a Sunny verse left on. Sometimes it makes the screen glitchy and nobody wants to see me glitch. So I started we started Tell No One when I just finished uni as my friend from school, right? And after we finished third year and we were pushed out into the real world, we were like, well, what do we do now? Like, how do you make a career? And Luke's dad is a photographer, and he had a photography studio. And in the studio, Canon 5D, this was about 10, maybe longer, years ago. And we were like, let's just go in every day, we'll shoot something. It doesn't matter if it's good or it's bad. What matters is that we upload it, put it on Vimeo, and if people like it, then people come to it. People don't like it, it's the internet and we've forgotten. But the main thing is that we have to go back and then we shoot something else. And just keep going, and then don't give in to self-doubt. Don't give in to, I feel like as filmmakers or creatives, we like to hold on to our ideas and to wait until they're perfect before releasing them to the world. But we were like, no, we're gonna make something, put it out by the next day, and then make something else and keep going. And we called ourselves Tell No One, and then gradually we made more stuff and we started getting popular, and then that's when we started doing like commercials and music videos and fashion stuff. And yeah, but for me, the commercials and stuff, that was like making a living. Like it was, it's really hard to sustain a career in film, and especially when you're starting out, especially if you're not born with certain, I don't know, if you don't have like money or you don't have like contacts in the industry, like neither of us did. Like to climb on, to get through it, to climb our way to the top, it takes a lot of time. And like this was like over 10 years ago, and I didn't start making enough money to not have to not work in the shop until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And so like, and commercials was like the way we could continue to try stuff out and experiment and have fun as filmmakers, but also make enough money to call it a job or have a career. So it's weird. So I guess it's what I'm getting at. It's weird now being seen as a commercials director when that was like a really important like cornerstone of just being a filmmaker, just being creative. And yeah, I don't know how else I could have made it in this industry if I didn't have the background in making commercials. And then and the other weird thing is that you start making commercials and you think, oh, you can just make a few commercials and then you kind of segue into narratives. But actually the worlds are very different. Yeah. And the people in commercials do not communicate, do not talk to people doing narratives. And so you feel like you've made a few commercials, but I had the cold realization that actually this is getting me nowhere if I wanted to make feature films. And so that's, luckily, I was able to make Tickle Monster, which helped me on that path.
I'm interested though, just before we get to Tickle Monster, which is going to be my next question, it feels like there are two things there. One is about, producing work and not attaching too much to like perfecting it, which is actually a really strong skill for any filmmaker to have. Just let it go, man. But also there's something about like the collective within that, right? And going to work every day and feeling like a normal person for whom it is. And so, and I think back to like the various film collectives that have existed in kind of non-mainstream spaces in the kind of history of filmmaking, whether it's the fucking LA Rebellion or the New Black Audio Collective, whoever, there is something about going to a place with other people every day and feeling like you're part of something. Which one of those do you think was more or less formative? Do you know what I mean? Like, was it more important to be with other people, or was it more important to learn to have kind of less ego, and be like, I'm not, I can just make shit?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I'm not too sure. I do know that working with Tell No One was my film school, working with Luke. And he, like, we're both, creative, thoughtful, emotional people. And so there was it was a really good lesson in having to deal with your ego and having to talk to someone else and discuss your ideas and be honest with each other when you don't think something's good enough. And to be critical of each other's work. And sometimes it was really hard. Sometimes we really pissed each other off. But we made some like stuff that I'm so proud of, like together. Like we just like we really had fun and we really did stuff that that I felt was like so interesting, so creative. And yeah, I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, word. I just think that that's, you know, so many filmmakers talk about like the thing that was their film school, whether you're like Quentin Tarantino, you know, being like, well, working in a video store, that was my film school. And I think there's something really telling about the kind of emotionality and generosity of your work, and actually that you're like, oh yeah, for me, it's other people, you know, that there, it was like a personal thing. Because I think filmmakers can become very inward, like, well, I need to just watch.
Oh, like I would naturally inward, like that was my real lesson from Tell No One. And when you start working professionally, there comes a point when it's not helpful to not be open with everything and to keep things closed up. Because you're the director, you're the writer, everyone's looking to you for answers for everything. And so it's a real lesson to be able to not just have an idea, but to be able to articulate it, to be able to talk to other people about it and help them see what you're seeing, and to make them not just feel like they're working on a project, but also for other people to feel a sense of ownership on the project, so they invest, you know, the same amount of love that you have. And I think as it's weird because as a director, and if you're a writer director, then you're probably an artist, and if you're probably an artist, then you're probably sensitive, and so you're probably it's probably feels a lot of feelings to let something out and to let other people put their hands on it. But it's so important to let that go, and it doesn't come easy. You learn as you go, but it's important to eventually be able to bring other people into your dream and to work together with others.
So you brought up Tickle Monster, so let's go there next. Let's talk about it. Can you give? I mean, I would argue that the title is also kind of a summary, but if you could give like a very brief summary for anyone who hasn't seen the film.
It's a spooky film about a guy who hates being tickled.
Do you hate being tickled? Is this where it all came from?
Hate being tickled, but actually it came from my friend. It's it's a part of a 5-part series that Eva Yates, who's at BBC now but was at Film 4, she was commissioning a bunch of new filmmakers to make little shorts, and she asked me, did I want to pitch an idea? And I was like, yeah, of course. And I was thinking, it reminded me of my friend, a conversation we're having, and you know, like with friends, he was talking just about like his love life and stuff, and he kept going on. Well, he was telling me this scenario where he was with this dude, and the dude kept tickling him, and he hates being tickled, but every time he was being tickled, he kept laughing, so it was almost as if consent for the guy to keep tickling more. And it was this nightmarish situation where he couldn't get the guy to stop tickling, even though he hated it. And it was really abusive. And I just thought that's terrifying, and that could be a horror film.
So had she asked you to pitch a horror film, or you were like, I want to make a horror film?
No, it was 5 bites. So it's for like the film for Halloween season. So she's like, do you want to pitch a horror film? And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
I mean, I think I've seen it several times. So I'm actually, I've just finished making a film for the new Film 4 series of short films.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Mine's a little sci-fi.
Awesome.
But what I was really interested in is that if somebody gives you the brief of write a horror, write a sci-fi, whatever it is, then it's about how you bring it to you, right? And so when I watch Tickle Monster, I go like, actually, I feel like the specificity of it being a Black man in that, and the whole like not wanting to touch and not wanting to seem to be not masculine, or you know,
Yeah.
that feels like, I don't know you, so like, I'm not commenting on you, like, but it feels like that's what Remi is saying to me. He's saying something very specific about Black masculinity. Or I'm massively overreading into this, but I'm like, oh yeah, this is quite a good takedown of Black masculinity, actually.
No, I mean, yeah, it is. I'm starting to sense a theme happening with the stuff I'm making, but it's yeah, it's yeah, I know from my experience, it's quite hard to be vulnerable as a man, and it's something, yeah, I think about a lot.
Where do you think, in terms of like your inspirations or your kind of, I always think that when you're making a short film, like the best thing is to give yourself a set of like rules or conditions to make it in. And I think there's something really interesting about like the practicality of the horror in Tickle Monster. Do you know what I mean? It's just like super fucking basic. And that's the best thing
So
about it.
basic. That's me.
Like I can feel it in my bones.
Yeah.
But you know, was that something that was governed by kind of budget or like time? Do you know what I mean? You were like, if I've only got X, I'm gonna do Y. Like, what was that for you?
100%. Another thing I learned in Tell No One is that our thing was all about, we just have a studio, not even a studio, a room and a camera. What do we make? And we always, you know, I come from a place where growing up, I said I had video cameras, so I was shooting stuff with friends. So I also grew up, I was kind of that kid at school who was like making stuff all the time, and so I used to make music as well. So I played around with Logic and Adobe Audition and Premiere and After Effects and what do you call it? The CGI. I've forgotten it. It'll come to me later. But like basically, I self-taught all these things, and same with Luke actually. And so we really got our hands dirty in shooting stuff, and then doing the edit, doing the music, doing the sound, doing visual effects. All the visual effects was just me and him on After Effects trying stuff out, and that's always been the kind of like DIY spirit that's always been part of the process, my process. And so with something like that, like I kind of reveled in having to try out stuff, doing stuff, you know, with what we had and trying stuff out on After Effects. And even on his house, like while I was editing, I had a computer in the edit suite and I was trying stuff out in After Effects. I was trying stuff out with the sound design. Of course, not trying to encroach on the other heads of departments. I was just trying stuff out, like ideas, but like I guess that kind of like doing, like using the really normal what little you have and seeing how you can create a spectacle from it is, I guess, part of my training.
Also, I think it's just because you brought up like DIY filmmaking, which again, like the kind of interconnection of Black and brown filmmakers with DIY filmmaking is as old as filmmaking itself. But like you know, and if you think about like even like the films of like Charles Burnett or you know all of those guys like that's like what I call like hook or crook filmmaking. Like just make the fucking film, find some way to make the film. But I think particularly in horror, that level like a bit of frugality of not having a lot, well, that's what led to like the Blair Witch Project, Joan, of like actually ultra. And so actually I think that there's something about Tickle Monster that makes me go, you don't need a lot if you really know how to scare people. And that's oddly about empathy in that film. It's like, oh, I know what that feels like, and I know that you know what that feels like. So I feel very connected with it, even though it's only, you know, a very small film. I'm like, oh, I've had quite a profound experience.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. But I think
I hate being tickled. So this is what I really. Oh my god, Remi sees me. Oh my god! Finally, a film that touches me.
I mean, that's the weird thing about storytelling, or anything actually. Like you can throw the kitchen sink at something, you can spend stupid amounts of money on something, but it's all about the idea, man. It's all about that simple idea, and that's what people see. That's what people connect with, not the like all that stuff. That's
so like I remember when you made Tickle Monster and like everybody was talking about it, and before you got to his house, was there like, you know, we've seen a lot of like feature adaptations of like really great viral horror shorts, you know, like Lights Out, which I do think is an amazing short film.
so good.
So was
I
there
love Lights Out.
Lights Out.
That's one of my faves.
Let's not talk about it. It's actually, there are very few things that scare me too much to talk about, but that's one of them. I'm just like,
it's like, it just, yeah, I love Lights Out. So clever.
But like, again, what do you need? I just need a light switch. I don't need anything else like that.
He's a great filmmaker to like watch his stuff and his webisodes of stuff. If,
yeah, I actually just watched
as a filmmaker, you want to.
I just think, again, it's very simple. It's very just like economical. But was there ever a Tickle Monster the feature?
I mean, people have a lot of people, producers have suggested it. No.
I love it. When I made my first short film, they were like, "Would you like to turn this into a feature?" I was like, "No, ma'am, I would not." And then really, no, because like I think, but that's the thing that I really love about Tickle Monster is it's trying to be a short film. It's a short horror film. Leave me alone.
Exactly, I've said all I wanted to say about that. Like, it's not. There's no more gas in the tank, and it's done.
I always think it's really useful when people say things like to you to just be like, tell me what it is that you like about it, and then I'll pitch you another story that does kind of the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's
I mean, that could work. It's really hard to, and I don't want to be like, please don't, I hope people don't take this the wrong way, but it's really hard to get creative ideas from the money people.
Yeah.
Or the producers. And I've been working in this industry for a bit now, and usually what people want from me, if I ask someone, what film do you want me to make? They're like, just make me the same thing you did the last time. And as a creative, that just makes your heart sing. And I've kind of maybe given up a little bit on that approach. People just want you to make the same thing as you did before.
So that's really interesting. Just because obviously we're not here to just talk about Tickle Monster, although we could talk about Tickle Monster.
We can.
We could. Let's just, we're like, fooled you, we're talking about his house. We're not. But so I'm just going to assume that everybody here has seen it, and if you haven't, tough. We're about to spoil the shit out of it. But actually, just to kick things off, I'm going to ask you just to give a very quick summary, like a one-line summary of his house.
Oh, sure. Wait, God, I haven't done this for a second. Hang on. Two asylum seekers are given a house in the UK, but upon arriving, they start to suspect there's something spooky within. Ooh.
that was an excellent summary. But I
literally like 5 people left and said that.
Bye. How dare you spoil it? But what I think is really interesting, and I didn't know necessarily, was that the film was already in development when you came on board. So I'm really interested about A, how you became involved in it, and B, because I think it's really interesting for directors under there, like how much it changed once you came on board, what the process of you making it your own was, and also just what drew you to it.
So, as I've said about 1 billion times today, I was part of Turn On, and the and the production company was signed at, based in central London. We always used to go in, and they used to share office space with 2 producers, the 2 guys from Star Child Pictures, and every time I was there, we just talked films, and they were into genre films, and I love all films, and so we were always talking about some kind of film. And one day I went in and they were like, we have this project, we're working with 2 other writers, but we're not really getting anywhere. We want to tell a horror film based on the immigrant experience, but there just wasn't really getting where they wanted, and they said, do you want to pitch us your take, your version of the story? And so I went away and I was thinking about it, and I realized I wasn't quite sure whether it was something I wanted to do, but what changed my mind, I guess, a couple of things. Firstly, I really, especially from the stuff they had told me about the story, it made me really feel that it was going to be another story that was told from an outside perspective. That was going to be the debates that you hear about, from politicians and whoever. And I was like, actually, I just wanted to be about the two people and be about. It wasn't even two people at that time. I wanted to be about strictly from their perspective and nothing else. And the second thing that made me change my mind was I guess I was trying to work out, if I'm going to write this, how do I, without being narcissistic, but I think you have to do this as a writer, as you're making something. Why is this? How am I going to connect this to me? What is my experience as a person, as a filmmaker? How can I share this story so I can come from it from some level of authenticity, regardless of how much research we do, and we did a lot. And I just remember growing up, like I grew up in London, and all my family, my friends, we're all so diverse and mostly from black and brown places. And growing up in London, whether it's the subtext or the text, it's about trying to work out how much of yourself you're willing to give up to fit into the culture. How much of yourself are you willing to assimilate, to feel safe, to feel okay? And I feel like for myself, and I'm sure it's for other people, you feel torn. You have one side of yourself that wants to fit in by any means possible, to disappear, to be part of the mainstream. But then there's that other side of you that's like, nah, like fuck that. I want to hold on to my history, my my heritage, and be proud of that, and stick out like a sore thumb, and like rebel in that way. But those two polar opposites are always kind of battling each other. And so I thought that would be so interesting is if we have this about two people, and those two people are the opposite way, play the opposite forces of this debate. And so, yeah, I pitched them like, this is the story I want to tell, these two people and these themes and stuff. And then, yeah, they liked it, so I wrote it, and then we made it.
Do you ever, and I say this as a Sudanese immigrant, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever say like, what's good? But I think there's something really interesting about, like, actually, when I started watching the film, I was like, who's this motherfucker Remi Weeks coming here telling me about? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like I had a little bristling. And then I got to with the black kids who she meets in the street. And I was like, Remi understands. Remi understands fundamentally the human like cost of the conversation that we're having. And I was, I would have hated to have seen the previous version of the film. Actually, I was like making this a human day-by-day experience. And, and the way that the camera moves in those scenes, and you really feel like, do you know what, I'm just in this like increasingly tiny world of these people, kind of all of my, like, my natural like prickliness around like specificity and all those things. I'm like, it's about two people. It's just about two people and experiencing the same thing very differently. And that's the stuff of like all great drama. Do you know what I mean? And actually, I think that's what makes it, to borrow the phrase, it's what elevates the film into a place of real like emotional heft of going, what would you do? Because we're all just people, right?
Yeah.
But just to talk a little bit about working with actors, and Trope and Wumi, they're both extraordinary actors. what was your kind of casting brief for that? What was your casting process? Like, were they always there in your mind? Had you engaged with work before?
No, I mean, the casting, like everything when you begin, is like broad brush, like let's just see people. And so we saw so many people. There was a casting director, Carmen Cuba, but she's based in LA. So we had a UK counterpart, and then Carmen came to the UK for a week during a week of heavy casting. And we were just seeing everyone. And actually, Chopin was performing on the stage at the time, and one of the producers, Eva, again, she had just seen him, and she was like, Remi, he needs to come in, and you need to see him. And then Wumi, she had just moved, or she's living in LA now, but she had come to the UK for something, I'm not too sure what. So she was just around for a few days, and we were really lucky that they were both able to come at the same time, and so we were both they were able to audition together, and it was just so good. It was so good, and it was so exciting to watch them. And they hadn't met, but they knew of each other. And I think maybe there's like a Black Actors WhatsApp, and so I know I think there's like, there's some kind of communication. So they knew, they weren't completely strangers. So they had a chemistry, and it was just really exciting. And so it was, yeah, we just.
And did their casting change anything for you? Did you go back like, oh man, if it's going to be Wumi, I'm going to write this scene where this happens. If it's going to be him, he's going to love football.
Oh, wow.
Whatever.
I mean, plot twist, things change a lot when you're making a film. And there is one thing I love actually is that they're both so funny as people. If you ever like watch an interview with them, you'll learn that they both give jokes, and like they a lot of the time, especially in the when you're rehearsing. I'm not married to my script. I'm not precious about anything in my life. And so, apart from the people I love. And so sometimes we rehearse, and sometimes they say let's just ad-lib stuff. Let's just try new stuff out. And this is the same with Matt Smith. Matt Smith is also really funny. Mm-hmm. And so they try stuff out, and their wit could be so much more fun than anything I'd written. And so we changed stuff out because they touched on something which I thought was particularly interesting or witty or thoughtful. And also they're both really, really smart people. And so we try stuff out, rehearse, and then Remi would quietly come up to me and be like, Remi, yes. She'd be like, I don't buy this. This isn't, I'm not sure this is working. And then I'd be like, okay. And then we'd have to think of a better way to do it. And so I love wonderful scenarios like that where both their presence and also Matt would change the direction of the film. If you've seen the film, there's a scene where Matt and Chopin are talking in an office, and so much of that was ad-libbing, was them, and we shot a lot of takes. We'd spent the whole day doing that scene, and they would just bounce off each other, and watching them bounce off each other and kind of go in these weird ways of, when you're creating a scene, two characters want something, the other character needs to block the other character. And so Chopin needs to get something, Matt needs to block him. And so finding ways of them doing that in, I guess, Matt's way is how to be British, polite, and bureaucratic, and never be nasty overtly. It's all about saying going around the things you want to say, and just so getting them to really bounce with each other in that kind of world was so much fun.
And how do you deal with bringing research to an actor's process? Like, you are talking about a, you know, specific, as much as they are just people, they're from a specific place and have a specific experience and a specific experience of conflict. You know, so at what point were you like, this is useful? And then at what point were you like, now we're just making a film? Like, now we're
honestly, it's the actor. I feel like I kind of get, it's the actor's decision, and both actors are very different. Chopin comes from a very analytical background, so he likes facts. He carries a book with him, and he wants to know the details. And so when you're in pre-production, we worked with a researcher, and Lucy built packs of research, and she'd go to the actors and women Chopin said, okay, what's helpful for you? What do you want? And so she'd give them what they needed, and what they use, it's honestly, it's really up to them. You know, as a director, part of your job is letting other people shine, the other people in the other HODs, and so I don't want to step on their toes when it comes to their process. If for Chopin he needs the details and the facts, then give him the details and the facts. If Remi is much more sensitive, much more, her process is so much more emotional. What she wants is less the facts, but more of like other details, more stories and first-hand accounts and stuff. Like that's like, you know, that's what she needs.
That leads me seamlessly, thanks, to a conversation about HODs, and generally about like, you know, your first film being at a budget level where you're like, holy shit, I can work with some like fancy peoples. You know, there are incredible HODs working on his house. You know, Remi Weeks, like it's an extraordinary list of HODs. So I'm kind of fascinated, like, you know, what was your process for selecting them and finding those people, and you know, were there people who fell by the wayside? Not naming names, but were you like, I know what doesn't work for me as well? Like, what were your kind of, just fascinated. I mean, we've all got a list of like fantasy HODs we're going to work with one day. Mine's like 300 long. So how do you whistle that down?
I mean, so this is my first film, and it's a relatively big budget compared to like, I don't know, then I guess a microwave feature. It's relatively big, and so to be completely honest and to be real about the situation, the amount of power I had about HODs wasn't the amount of power that maybe I'd love to have, or that a lot of making films is about, I guess, the give and take. I had what I wanted to do, but from the studio's perspective, they need to be of a certain caliber for them to feel safe that I'm directing it. And so I wasn't able to use the usual people I work with on my short films and my commercials works there, because their CVs wasn't what the studio needed for them to feel comfortable that I was directing it. And so it really, the people I chosen, like they're all like, I love all of them. Like I worked with such a great team, but it would be a lie to say that I had carte blanche, that I could just like pick anyone I wanted and they'd come and work on the film with me. It was, how about this guy? And then they would be like, can you see more work they've done? And or how about her? And they're like, what?
No, there's Remi.
You have a client, and there's some amount of having to get through the system.
But did you manage to turn that into a positive where you're like, well, if I can't work with the people I want to work with, then I'm going to work with these. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think you have to.
Oh, like I'll say this again. I loved everyone I worked with. Like they're all so awesome. So I guess what I'm saying is that like the people I worked with, like, are so great and so awesome, but we had to work to get there. It wasn't like my fantasy league.
Yeah.
It was like, how about this? No, how about this? No, and then it's like, how about this? Like, yeah, and like it's the business side of filmmaking.
Yeah, I just think it would be churlish for us to pretend that, like, and also I think, like, certainly you can have like really strong principles as well, where you're just like, for me, like, I only want to work in films that are full of women and people of color and trans people. Like, that's how I want to make
Yeah,
films. But it's really like, if the other people you work with, do not cherish those things or value those things, like, what are you, I just think there's no answer for it. I just think we have to be really, like, honest about that, or you're like, and
yeah,
particularly you're a first-time filmmaker and you're like, bro, I'm the wild card, and they don't fit,
yeah.
it's a real pressure that gets put on you. So yeah.
It's really hard, and you know what? Maybe if I was doing a different kind of film, if it was a microwave feature or something with less money, I think they would be more like there would be less fear if it was government funded completely, and then there would be less fear about just me picking the people I love. But the thing with this film is that even though it's like an indie, it still had American money, and so there's still there was a certain amount of like I had to really walk a tightrope between doing what I wanted and also having a studio that I had to talk to every day. And that was, it was never always easy. And yeah, as you're saying, like, and it's something that's changing. And I know there's people in the industry like Eva, for example, who's trying to make the change. But so many times, like I would ask about like something that's important for me in this film is making sure there was enough people of color on the team, and there was so much pushback about, yeah, we want people of color in here too, but we just can't find anyone, and or they just don't have a big enough CV, and so there's you're also battling that kind of thinking as well as I guess just trying to make your film. And it's I don't know, it's a weird, it's a sticky industry.
I think it's also really difficult because there are people that you can be like, but oh my god, this person's like amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm like in the process of making my first feature at the moment, and I was like, well, obviously Rena Yang isn't gonna like shoot my first because she's amazing, and and then
she
going,
is.
who? And you're like, what do you mean who? Like,
Yeah.
how dare you not know this incredible, and I feel like very often you're doing this kind of job of publicizing people who shouldn't need to be publicized. You're like, everybody should know who these amazing, like, diverse filmmakers are, and they don't. And so I'm always like,
it's also like a different generation. Like again, like the commercials and the music videos, like that's like one kind of team of kind of younger people, and then like you have in the film industry, which is much more older and much more insulated, and so they're going to pick the people they know, and they're going to be old. They're going to be amazing people, like amazing, brilliant, talented industry people, but they're by nature aren't as diverse, and so to kind of pull new people in, like it can be a fight.
I think that also you have to, like,
Fight.
I do not make my best work when I'm surrounded by a load of old white dudes. Like, I am dealing with feeling uncomfortable. I am dealing with feeling tokenized. Like, so actually, if you want me as a Black woman to make my best work, then you will surround me with more people that look like me, because that brings out the best in me. So I always think it's like, you can't just have one. You have to have at least two. Or ideally 12 million. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it'll help me be better. I promise. Do you know what I mean? I was interesting just 'cause I think like it is an extraordinary, you're right, like we expect kind of first features in this country to be somewhere around 500,000 to 1 million, and obviously you were playing with much more than that, but was there ever a 500,000 version of His House where you're like, well, if I had all the money in the world, I'd, and then you're like, oh, now I have it. No, I'm being
I mean, it wasn't like we would have made it in any budget point. I think we just really wanted to make it.
So what was that like when you had to suddenly go, okay, we're talking about X amount of money, like now were there like a list of kind of sequences where you're like, oh my God, I've been dying to put this in, but there was no way we could afford it, and now I can?
No, it wasn't even that. Like the sequences were all written in the script. You write not thinking about the money. You just go like, oh yeah, that would be cool. But yeah, honestly, like I try not to think about like the money aspect of it, because I think when you think about it, you start to panic. I think there was just more pressure from the US side. But that's part of being a director, is that you have to you have to be the swan.
Can I ask a super nerdy question just before we go to other people's questions, which is about production design? Because I was really interested in the house. Like, I feel like what's really great about all of the horror sequences throughout the film is that it feels like I'm rediscovering that house every time. I'm like, how is this the same room? I swear we've been in this one room, but it feels like the house contains lots, like the choreography of the horror sequences make this house feel infinite. So I was sort of interested as to whether, like, were you working with your production designer to be like, I'm going to have to do all these different scares in these walls, so I'm going to, do you know what I mean? Like, or was it retrofitted? Hey man, I'm looking at this room and I'm thinking, do you know what I mean? Like, did you build a house of horrors in your script, and you're like, you're going to have to build something that does all of these things?
I mean, there's obviously a certain level in the script, but I worked with Jacqueline Abrahams, who's an amazing production designer, and we were always talking about how this is almost a one location film. Like, how do we tell a story from the one location? And so we found it's a real house in Tilbury in Essex. So in fact, once we found the house, she designed it visually so it would strip back throughout the film. And so as things get a little bit crazy, the house becomes more, I guess, texturally rougher and more manic and drained of color. So
I really enjoyed just like how much the house is liminal. Like, you're just like, what are walls when there are things that live like between walls, between dreaming and waking? Like, I was like, oh man, this is great. I'm radically running over, so we have like a hot minute for some questions from the audience, which I will read. The first one is, when you have an idea for a project, how do you know whether it's an idea worth working on, or whether it's a random idea that isn't worth exploring? When you give up on an idea, do you have an ultimate project in the back you want to make? I'm like, this. We could have talked for an hour just about this.
Oh no. I feel like when something's working as an idea. Like, it just. So back to Turn On. Did you know I was in Turn On? Luke and I, we always had to. We're always trying to come up with ideas. What's a new film, and blah blah blah. And we spend days Google Docs like writing. How about this? How about this? What about balloon? And we can just go on for ages, and we always kind of know when we're onto something. You just feel it. And I wish I had I wish there was like a science to it, but I don't know if there is. You just feel it. I guess one way it works is when you're able to articulate it, when you're being able to tell someone else and it makes sense to them, and they're like, like once you can say it and someone else gets it, And that's when I feel like you're hitting something there. That's what I'd say.
I think also, like, don't you just have that thing where you're like, it might be the right idea, but it might not be right now? Jane, like, I may just like not be in the right place to tell it. So just like put it in a drawer. Just like put it in a drawer. Come back to that shit. It might be amazing in a year when you're like, well, since, you know, traveling to this place, I'm like, you know, like, now I understand. Now I've got the key. But like,
Yeah,
I don't think there are very many like utterly terrible ideas. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're just like,
I've got plenty. I
Yeah,
have
how
lots
dare
of
you.
terrible ideas. I could no, I'm not gonna.
But like, it might not be. I promise you. Maybe in 10 years you'll come back and be like, turns out that terrible idea was actually pretty good, and it's what I won my Oscar for. My next audience question is: I wonder what Remi's writing process looks like as a writer.
Oh no.
Does he map out the camera shot selections in great detail when writing, or does that technical process come after the writing process has been completed?
I don't. Well, like, so in your head you might map it out, the camera stuff, which is I mean, I do that. I would never write it though. I think the writing process is, the aim of it is quite different to the making of a film. You're just trying to get the other person to read your idea and to be like, this is a great story. And so when someone's reading it, they don't necessarily need to know the cameras and the positions. They just want to be, your job is to stop them from looking away from the page, from like getting bored. And so it's all about the story. So focus on telling a great story, keep it simple. Like, I mean, sometimes it's good to put like a camera position if it's particularly fundamental to the storytelling. Like if it's like a reveal, for example, if you suddenly reveal something with the camera, then maybe it'll be fun to write it because it helps the person imagine it. But like, I don't like, that shouldn't be the thing when you're writing it. The thing is telling a story, getting the person hooked, and making them think like this is going to make a great film.
I think don't you find when you're writing a horror script that you're like, sometimes you have to write the camera in because it tells you what the scare is, where you're like, we reverse again, there's nothing in the mirror, you know, what, like,
I don't think that makes it read scarier though for the audience. Like, I don't know whether, like, you can try that, but I mean, I don't think when I was writing the horror sequences, I mean, I probably did it a little bit, but to my focus at least was to make a sequence read scary, but make it read scary, not through camera positions and stuff, but just make the sequence really scary. There's something in the dark, and the person's moving towards it. They hear a sound. They hesitate. Everything's silent. Like like that's what you need. For me, my perspective, anyway.
I have time for one very last question. And it's I know, we've had such a nice time together.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I'm like, this has been great.
Yeah, it's been good.
What is the number one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is working towards their debut feature? Come on, Uncle Remi, you can do it.
Oh no,
you're an elder now. You're giving advice.
Oh no. One. I don't know if I can give a one. Let me see. Let me think. Something good. Is it working towards a debut feature, or they're like just in pre-production? Do you think? This is the advice everyone says. It's all this time, and but it's really important, and it's for me. It's like I think it was essential for me to make stuff. Just make stuff, like, and not just make stuff, but put it out. Make stuff and put it out. That other people see it. I think that's you don't like you need to, like, this is a career that doesn't happen quickly. Maybe for some people it does, but for most people it doesn't. It's not something that's easily teachable. It's something that you have to just work at and understand it. Filmmaking is weird. it's a weird mixture of different abilities you need to have, working with people, being able to tell a story, being able to work with actors, being able to sit in and edit, being, it's all a bit of a mystery, and you only really know that by making stuff and then failing and then making something else.
Filmmaking is weird, and we are the weirdos. Remi, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for sharing your
It's been a pleasure.
and experience. It's been a joy. I cannot wait to see what you do next. Thanks to everyone at home who has tuned in this evening. If you haven't already, don't forget to register for other events in the Guru Live program, including film sessions, The Strategy of Shorts, next Monday, November 16th, and Creative Collaboration, a Rocks case study on Tuesday, November 24th. Peace.